And with that, I think we can get started. My name is Bill Gordon. I am the Vice President of Business Development here at Business Advantage, and I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've been with Business Advantage for just over 10 years now. And prior to this, I worked for many years in the software industry, including 12 years at a company called Autodesk that makes AutoCAD. I'm joined today by my colleague, Nicola Mansfield. Nicola is Director of Research Services here at Business Advantage and a company director. And she has been at Business Advantage for 22 years and has run literally thousands of research, including hundreds and hundreds of UX research projects. And Nicola is based in our headquarters office just outside of London in England. And finally, I'm very pleased today to welcome our guest speaker, Kevin Simmons from Volvo's Innovation Lab, based here in Silicon Valley in California. And I'll introduce Kevin more fully later when he speaks in today's session. So the reason we're doing this presentation on UX maturity is because we've been doing global user experience and market research for many, many years for many of the world's leading companies. And with the rapid growth that you all would be very keenly aware of within the focus of implementing user experience, insights into new products, we have seen a lot of changes across UX research design teams in recent years, especially. It's just become so important. So we thought it'd be useful to share the data on these different paths that we see companies taking to improve their UX maturity of the UX teams and the value that your teams are able to deliver, along with sharing some of the common challenges that are faced by UX teams that we see and that came out of this research. As you all probably know, there's no single path or methodology that grows the maturity or value of user experience teams within organizations. Each organization really seems to have its own unique path and unique needs and challenges. And therefore, the companies really seek a wide variety of user experience services as they work to move their user experience teams and work and deliverables to the next level. So with that introduction, and with the rapid increase in the importance of user-centric design that you all focus on, and recognizing that there really is an evolving landscape within user experience. We're constantly hearing new terms that are coming up within the UX world. We wanted to conduct this user experience maturity study to share and shed some light on the current state and what are the common current future needs for user experience research and design. Our goal with this study is to provide some reliable industry data to all of you, some benchmarking tools, and some practical guidance and thoughts to address some of the most pressing challenges that are being faced by user experience research and design professionals. Also, we wanted to help determine a clear path forward to increase the value of user experience teams, services, and deliverables within organizations. So those are the goals. So we hope that's what we're going to be able to support you in achieving today. The research is divided into 6 major areas that we're going to talk about today, and they are team size and experience levels, adoption and use of different UX research methodologies, third, pain points facing UX teams, then how teams are using external or contracted resources and kind of why, and then outlook into the future needs and services for user experience and design. And then we bring all of those findings together into a tool to assess organizational maturity of user experience teams. We're really going to start today with a look at who participated in the research and then the resulting UX maturity amongst those participants, and then we'll go through the other areas mentioned here. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Nicola, who's going to talk us through the research results. Over to you, Nicola.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. So the last couple of months, we've been conducting some research. We used a web survey approach, and we were focusing on UX professionals around the world. The results today are based on over 100 responses. I think it's a total of 133 that we received. And as you can see on the left-hand side of the charts here, most of the participants were either user experience leaders in roles such as a UX manager, or the actual UX researchers themselves, product designers, heads of UX. And there were some individual contributions from roles such as UX writers and interaction designers. Most of the participants were from large companies, with 52% having at least 1,000 or more employees, and 31%, just under a third, were from medium-sized organisations with between 251 and 1,000 employees. There were also some responses from people at small organisations where they have fewer than 100 employees. In terms of industries, we typically work with B2B technology companies and organisations across many different industries. And we work with UX, product and research leaders across all of those areas. So we had participants from software and hardware organisations in all of these industries, as well as participants specifically from finance and banking, professional business services, healthcare, retail, government and manufacturing. The majority of responses were received from UX professionals in the US, in Canada and the UK, but we did have representation for a number of countries, including Croatia, Netherlands, India, United Arab Emirates, France, Slovenia, Germany and Malta. Next slide, please.
Nicola, how many people participated in the research?
133 overall. There were a few questions where they didn't all answer.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. So this is the UX maturity customer model that we developed in-house. And the purpose of the model is really to help organizations identify where they are in terms of a scale of UX maturity. So once you know where you are in terms of that UX maturity scale, we can help you identify where the gaps and opportunities are, and to continue to increase the value that the UX team is able to deliver within the organization. Since we do a lot of research in support of UX teams, this also enables us to understand where a customer is likely to want help and where they want support as they continue to build out with their team. The maturity stages we identified range from commencing on the left of the hand side of the chart. And that's really where organizations are just beginning their UX journey, typically within organizations that may not yet perceive the importance of UX. All the way through a number of stages to refined on the right-hand side. We've identified a total of 8 stages of maturity, which are based on a series of questions that we asked about how user experience research and design is used, how it's perceived within the participants' organization, the methods used, how much stakeholder support they have, how they collaborate, and how they share and store information. So just take you through the different stages. Commencing, as it suggests, is the very early stages or the foundation of UX practices within the organization. So they're often lacking a clear direction or a structure in terms of the UX project delivery process. And amongst our sample, 7% fitted into that stage. Unstructured was where the organization has an inconsistent application of UX principles. So there's really a lack of stakeholder support. Research efforts are scattered and coordinated, and the design implementation varies, and teams are often working in silos. They're not collaborating, they're not sharing information and that the valuable findings they're obtaining. Often storage of data is also a problem, and about 12% of respondents seem to fit into that category. The next one is seeking, and here these types of organizations have a dedicated team of UX practitioners. They're typically working individually. They're implementing evidence-based UX strategies, and they're seeking to develop more influence with stakeholders. And about 22% of the respondents fit into that group. Taking root is where an organization has defined methodologies for UX decision-making. So the data analysis is used to inform successful design approaches, and they're using design thinking. So here we found about 17% of our respondents fitted into that stage. Optimization is really where UX is more woven into the company culture. It leads to exceptional user engagement, and they're using metrics to demonstrate the value of UX investments. And there are typically stakeholders who are actively championing user centricity, and that represented about 12% of our participants. Morphing is where an organization has a deep understanding of UX. They're constantly evolving based on the user feedback and data. And products and services are naturally attracting and retaining customers. And that was about 15% of our respondents. When it comes to ecosystem, that's where an organization has begun to systemize UX initiatives. So they're developing a structured ecosystem, they're retaining and sharing data and knowledge across the company, and the whole organization is aware of the benefits of UX. So information is shared, it's retained, and it's easily accessible. And we found about 4% of our respondents fitted into that stage. Finally, refined is where an organization has got a really developed, consistent UX improvement culture. They've got support for UX principles at the very highest level of the organization in terms of the leadership, and there's cross-functional collaboration and commitment to a long-term UX strategy. The UX teams and methodologies are well developed, and they have engagement across the organization. And we actually found about 11% of our respondents fitted into that stage. And this is actually a slide that we developed to share in a short report that we actually sent out to everyone who participated in the research if they wanted to know where their organization actually sits within the UX maturity scale. So next slide, please. Thanks. So we know from experience that working with a variety of UX teams across multiple industry sectors, that the size of the team can really vary enormously. And in the survey, we found that almost 2/3 of UX teams, about 64%, have between 2 and 20 members. So there's a substantial investment in UX capabilities, but there is a wide range of team sizes. And 23% of our sample had more than 50 people in their UX research and design teams. What we noticed, and what we think that the survey supports, is that often quite large companies have very limited UX resources. And amongst our respondents, there were at least 11 companies with more than 1,000 employees, but they had teams of just 2 to 5 people within their UX team. And 8 of those companies actually had more than 5,000 employees. Next slide, please. We asked how many UX projects on average are being run at any one time. And what we found was more than half of the organizations, about 61%, manage up to 20 concurrent UX projects. So there's a substantial ongoing commitment to UX initiatives, but there's a notable spread in the project loads, and we've got organizations managing very few projects and others having a very large volume of projects. And it's really reflecting the diverse organizational structures and their priorities. It looks like smaller teams with 2 to 5 people are typically working on between 1 and 20 projects at a time. The larger teams with more than 100 UX personnel are working on at least 50 or more projects concurrently. And 5 of those companies are actually working on more than 200 UX projects at one time. In our experience working with UX teams, we've found that UX professionals are kept very busy. Teams are very lean and typically quite small relative to the number of projects they're being asked to work on. Next slide, please. So we asked participants which methods they were using the most. And not surprisingly, usability testing, web analytics are the most widely adopted methods. So there's a strong focus on measuring and optimizing user experience. Qualitative methods, things like in-depth interviews, journey mapping, they're also very popular. And there's a balanced approach there, understanding user behavior. But there does seem to be quite a significant gap in the adoption of some of the more specialized methodologies, things like biometric testing, facial coding. So there's obviously potential areas for growth and deeper user insights. In our work, we see a lot of interest in areas such as jobs to be done research, also persona building, particularly use of personas to inform the development of next generation products. And with persona building being done by about 31% of our respondents, this does seem to match with our experience working with clients. It's no surprise to us that jobs to be done is only being used by 20% of participants. Often there does appear to be a lack of knowledge about this approach, and often although there's quite a lot of interest in it, it's often felt to be too complex to implement. We also asked how UX research and design methods are used in respondents' organizations. And it was quite interesting that just 16% of participants indicated that they've established and documented the UX processes that exist across the teams. So there's really an opportunity for more organizations to fully integrate UX across their development cycles and their teams. So I'm going to hand back to Bill now, who's going to talk to you some of the pain points that we discovered as part of the survey.
Thank you, Nicola. But just before we do that, I'm going to put up a one question poll here that's relevant to the next slide. It's going to ask you to indicate your top 3 user experience challenges that you face within your organization, in your team. And then I'll share those results on screen with you, and then we can look and compare them with the top challenges that came out of the survey results. So I'm going to put that up on the screen right now. All right. Well, thank you all for doing that. That's interesting to see. Good. Well, this is probably my favorite slide in the whole deck, because I think it's always really interesting, useful, and important to understand pain points, particularly so that we can focus on how to overcome those pain points. I know now that it won't surprise y'all to know that time constraints, budget constraints, resource constraints came in as the top 3 challenges, because they just came in the top 3 challenges for you all as well. And interestingly, these are the top 3 pain points, regardless of geography, industry, or company size. They were consistently across the board, the top 3. We know how busy user experience teams are and user research teams are. So again, that won't surprise you. So difficulty recruiting participants, that also, I think that came in, my math is right, in the top 3 or 4 in the poll that we just did as well. So difficulty recruiting participants for user research, that came in as 28% of the respondents in our survey. It was interesting, especially a problem within the manufacturing sector and within government sectors, but also was significant within IT and software companies, healthcare, and finance and banking. We know from our clients of all sizes that just not enough resource is a challenge across most industries. Working in silos, I also saw that came up significantly in the poll we just did now, and an internal lack of collaboration, lack of stakeholder support, and proving the return on investment. I didn't make a note of how that came in just right now with all of you, but was significant amongst the UX teams that responded to the survey. So those were some of their next biggest pain points. So, and I did find it, thank you all for participating. I thought that was interesting to see your input. Let me get the Q&A. We'll come back to the Q&A in a moment. Moving on to the next slide. And by the way, and we'll come back to some of these pain points when we discuss pain points with Kevin from Volvo in just a few moments. So earlier, Nicholas spoke about the size of the user experience teams, and this slide's related, but focuses on how UX skills within those teams are addressed within organizations, and if there are sufficient UX skills and resources available. We already know the resource answer, but only 23% of the people that participated, bumped ahead here. Only 23% of the people that participated say they have sufficient resources, meaning that 77% of the organizations require more support and resources, suggesting a potential talent shortage or simply underinvestment in user experience within most organizations. The organization, and kind of at the bottom, the organizations that indicated that they do not have dedicated UX staff were all organizations with very few, small numbers of simultaneous UX projects being run. It was interesting to us to see that larger teams with 51 to 100 people in their user experience teams had the highest incidence of not having enough UX people to do all the work needed. So even those larger teams don't feel that they have enough dedicated user experience staff. We work with a number of companies with 200 plus user experience researchers, and still they don't feel that they have enough time to get things done. And even very, very big organizations, over 1,000 employees, 45% or more of those organizations say they don't have enough UX practitioners and professionals to do the work needed. But all sizes of teams, 2 to 100 plus, all have need for more dedicated staff. So if you're feeling overworked and like there's just too much to be done and not enough time and not enough resource, you're in good company. One of the ways that companies are filling in the gap in resources is through the use of external user experience resources and contractors. So the majority of the organizations, 74%, do utilize some sort of external resources for UX work, primarily through contractors, both in-house contractors and external contractors. The services that are most commonly hired out or in, most frequently, are first conducting research, second recruiting participants, followed by third help designing surveys, questionnaires, and discussion guides. So these are all the areas where external partners are used, and they do align closely with the pain points we just discussed a few moments ago: time, resource constraints, and challenges recruiting user experience participants. Continuing down this list on the right-hand side to the fourth item, you see that using external resources for UX methodology training, that was interesting to see. I hadn't expected that one to come in. And then specialized foresight research, identifying long-term trends, is a specialty that's outsourced oftentimes. And then creating reports, deliverables, and selecting appropriate research methodologies for achieving the research result and objectives. Finally, we asked what services might be useful to you in the future, kind of looking ahead. As you can see, the top future need is for strategic user experience services to identify long-term trends conducting foresight research. We have a colleague internally, Ardeshir, who's online today, who has his PhD in foresight and foresight research. So this was kind of heartwarming to us to see, admittedly. And it's been interesting. We are beginning to see more of our clients that are hiring internal dedicated foresight teams. They tend to be small teams, but they are beginning to hire dedicated foresight professionals. So if that's something your organization is looking at, you're kind of you're leading amongst the companies that we see, but we are starting to see that. Continuing down the list, services to conduct user experience research required by over a third, 40% of respondents. And this is especially important for companies with 500 to 1,000 employees, where over half of the people that responded to the survey have a need for help conducting user experience research. Companies also see a future need for recruitment and scheduling of participants for research, as well as provision of training and webinars on methodologies for research. There are some slight variations that we saw by country. For example, in Canada, there's a much higher demand for focus on foresight, long-range planning research than in other countries. And in the US and the UK, there's a higher focus on the need for that UX methodology training than there is on foresight research. So that's the end of our survey results today. And now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today, and we'll do a little discussion. So I'm thrilled today to introduce to you all Kevin Simmons. Kevin is a senior service designer for Volvo's Innovation Lab that's based here just down the road from me in Silicon Valley here in California. Before coming to Volvo, Kevin held user experience research and design roles at both ADP and SAP within the SuccessFactors at SAP. At Volvo, Kevin is tasked with his primary goal is leading Volvo Group's organizational transformation to significantly increase their service-generated revenue. To achieve that, he collaborates globally with his internal teams across all Volvo Group's brands, and he also works with startup partners and venture capital groups to develop investment proposals for new services to be offered. Kevin and his team utilize human-centered and design and user research methods to document stakeholder touchpoints, sentiments, and motivations in order to develop minimum viable products backed by validated user value statements. Daily, Kevin works to establish design as a core business function with responsibility to develop technology in service of human needs. That's what motivates him. So we've had the pleasure of getting to work with Kevin over the past 4 years. I'm going to just ask Kevin a few questions and for him to ask him to add some comments on some of the items that came up today out of the research. So Kevin, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bill.
So before we dig in, would you mind just telling us briefly a little bit about what the Volvo Innovation Lab is and does, and what a senior service designer does within Volvo and the innovation?
Yeah, so the innovation lab I work at is located in Mountain View, and we are situated here where the rest of the company is not here. Our US headquarters are in Greensboro, North Carolina, and globally it's in Gothenburg, Sweden. So we're here in Silicon Valley because of the startup ecosystem. Our kind of charter is to work in an open innovation capacity. So it's kind of external R&D. So we don't develop any IP within the innovation lab. We work mostly in developing partnerships with startups and our customers, clients, other vendors and stuff like that. And what we have to do then is also dig very deep into the organization and develop those kinds of relationships to then help metabolize these external partners, basically their concepts, their ideas, their technologies into our organization. So we facilitate that. So as a service designer, I'm sitting within this kind of orchestration hub, you could say. And we're looking at the transportation and logistics industry. We also work in construction equipment as well. So that's another space that we work in. But for the purposes of this conversation, I'll talk mostly about the transportation sector. It's a very complex environment. We have our shippers, receivers, carriers. We have import, export, customs. We have all these different players that are in the ecosystem. And we also have all these technology partners. So as a service designer, I'm working very closely with our business areas to understand what value we want to deliver to customers in the future, conducting customer research as well around these topics, reframing like what often starts as a product feature, like a wish list item, into an actual service concept that's going to create value for all the stakeholders in that ecosystem that service concept will serve. So that translation process is really important for us. And that then becomes a very design-driven approach to then startup scouting and all of that, where we have a service concept that access those requirements. So that's kind of where I'm situated in the organization, is as a service designer, trying to facilitate that whole process of developing a very clear need that then will go out into the market and find those partners.
Good. No, thanks very much. I know you don't have user experience in your title and role anymore, but can maybe share a little bit about the role of your user experience and connecting with customers, prospects, users out in the world, and how that relates to your work in innovation and in automotive and transportation. What's the need for user experience design within your transportation world?
Yeah, so you see a big picture of a truck here. So there's a huge part of user experience in the group, which is HMI, so human machine interface or interactions, right? So that's the stocks and the steering wheel controls and all the in-dash kind of like interactions that a driver is going to have with the vehicle. So that's all the onboard stuff. Then we also have more of the HCI space, so human computer interaction, which we would segment more like off-board. So that's like fleet management applications, driver apps, things like that. So I work in more of that off-board space. So when we're talking about a digital service, we're talking about ways for a trucking company to optimize their operations using data that's coming off of the vehicle. So these, since 2013, have been sending tons of telematics data into the air, well, in the cloud, we'll say. And now we're tasked with kind of translating that into something that a customer can actually use to see value in. And anybody else who's working in the B2B space on this call will probably resonate with some of that. We were starting with data and trying to figure out what the data story is that's going to be valuable and deliver insights that, you know, somebody could actually take action on it within their business. So that's the space that we're operating in.
Good. No, thanks, Kevin. Kevin, just pivoting a little bit to, you saw that the challenges and pain points that came up as a result in the survey and the little poll that we ran just now. And I don't, we've talked for many times over the years. I don't think any of these will surprise you either, as some of the leading challenges, resource constraints, budget time constraints, challenges recruiting participants, proving the ROI, the return on investment value of user-centric design and user experience research. I guess, do these align with your experience? And can you share a little bit about how you and your teams are addressing some of these challenges? I think that might be useful for many people on the line today. And I can take them one at a time if you want, or if you want to just hit them as they come.
So I wrote down my top three from the poll earlier. So I can maybe start with those. And if you have any other follow-ups, I know we discussed this previously as well. So happy to talk about some of the other ones. But I'll say some of these are evergreen problems for us, and other ones are ways we found ways to kind of maneuver around these constraints or these pain points. So I think the number one thing that my team experiences, we're 8 people, and there's only one other service designer on the team. So we do all of the customer research and UX research type work, and we're each working on 4 to 5 projects at a time. So it's a lot for us to manage. And so the number one thing is time constraint for us. So we don't really have time to, the second one is recruiting participants. So we don't really have time to recruit participants and do cold calling and things like that. It's not that we don't find that work valuable. If we had the capacity to do that, we certainly would, but it's not our core capabilities as an organization. We also have many other people, again, working in the B2B space might find this, that we have account managers in the company that monitor those relationships with our customers. So we can't just reach out to customers and survey them and interview them every once in a while, whenever we want to. So we have to be very clever in the way that we recruit participants. So we need to kind of go out and not present ourselves as Volvo, but present ourselves more as a marketing company. And that's not really what our company does. We're very good at telling everybody that we're Volvo. So that's a space that really requires us to then look externally for partners to find those participants for us and make sure we have inputs into our design process. I'll say one other thing about the Innovation Lab. When I started 2.5 years ago, there was nothing. There was no customer research, no inputs to the design process. There was literally nothing. There was like a PowerPoint deck with 3 slides, welcome to Volvo, figure it out kind of thing. So this is something very near and dear to my heart, is to like develop customer research and develop those capabilities. And so bringing inputs into our design process has been so important. And anybody else who is experiencing some low UX maturity might also resonate with, like, we just don't have enough inputs to really make a good design. We don't understand our customers that well, maybe, or our users. So despite the time constraints, that's something that I've been able to kind of build the business case for. And so we're really starting to see the value of having that steady stream of inputs into our process. And the last piece to add here too, around internal collaboration, it's really hard to launch a research study if nobody can agree on what we want to learn. And so that's usually the capacity in which I see the internal collaboration stalling or drawing out projects. So that's an evergreen issue for us. We're always going to have internal debate and have to rectify those conflicts in some way. But when we can get it across the line and do some research, usually people will start to see some value in it if we have scoped it properly and we didn't kind of blow the scope and try and satisfy one thing for everybody.
Very good. All right, so that's one of the ways that you try to collaboration and working in silos. I know that's an important challenge that comes up for many of the organizations. So, sorry, can you just repeat for me kind of how you're addressing that?
Well, I'll say it's a bit of an evergreen issue because, we may develop a relationship with somebody and then they move in the organization, or they leave, and then somebody else joins, and then we have to kind of rebuild those relationships. But one thing also to add is, as an innovation lab, I know a lot of folks who are working in internal teams I experienced this in some of my previous roles. The innovation lab teams were always these like kind of, exclusive, doing all the cool stuff, not very democratized kind of innovation labs, but with where we're situated, we really depend our relationships with people in the core of the business. So we are actively really, really trying to collaborate with people and build relationships. So working across silos as a group function, we can't be choosy about who we want to work with. We really need to find a way to work with everybody. So I'd say part of it is we need to actually design the relationships we have across silos. So we go into our interviews with a new stakeholder in a new business unit or brand that we need to work with a moderator guide ready to go. It's just like everything needs to be very prepared and designed and thoughtful in the way that we work with folks. Because the thing is, like, the value of UX design, at least in my organization, doesn't speak for itself. It usually doesn't. We are stewards of our profession. And so we have to present ourselves in a way, steer a conversation in a way, do all the things for somebody to see value in what we do in order for them to see the value in like UX research or UX design work. So I don't know if that got at it, though, what you're asking, but that's kind of, I think, how we have to approach, or how we are approaching internal collaboration within my team.
Super. No, thank you. Kevin, I know you use and work with external resources and consultants because we are part of that ecosystem of yours. Can you just share a little bit? And some comments just came in the Q&A about challenges for recruiting and certain systems that are being used, especially for very small teams that are helping you with that. But you had some unique perspectives, I think, on how you select what you're going to do, what you're going to outsource and what you're going to insource, and the value you perceive in that. Could you, in just our last few minutes, could you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah. Can you reiterate that once more for me, Bill? Yeah.
What you, when we were talking the other day just about what you outsource, you look for, I understand you look for organizations that have a really highly specialized capabilities that you don't have in-house. But you use external sources rather than just hiring more people. I mean, one choice is you could simply hire more people. But I think you said that even solves your problems.
Yeah, so this is a challenge we have. We're a small team and we do work with a lot of external partners. But Bill and I were talking about, well, what happens if we just hire another UX researcher or hire somebody to drive that internally? But we'll still need to recruit people. We'll still need to bring inputs into our process. And as a company, again, it's not our core competency to do this. We're very good at manufacturing vehicles. We're getting better with software and all that. We're learning very quickly and we're learning to be competitive in that space. But this is a totally different script for us within how we interact with our customers and talking about software and talking and even for our customers, it's sometimes hard to articulate like what they need or what value they might see in a solution if we're doing more like a usability test. So for us, we usually really need to work with an external partner to get really specific about who we want to talk to, and bring that into our organization, because we have some folks who've tried the cold calling approach and usually they get their hands slapped or they get these other kinds of just friction and resistance. So yeah, we don't really find that to be something that we're particularly strong at. But when we look at these external partners, like they can help us with that. Yeah, usually we find the timelines to align better. If we dig deep, we can find the resources for it as well. And that's still not an easy conversation, as many people are, many organizations are resource constrained, especially today. But we need people who are really good at recruiting the right people. That's more important to us than talking to people, because we're in a very niche industry and we can't just go out and talk to anybody. For an example, we need to find truck drivers of dump trucks that work on quarry sites and specific, like this is so specific. It's not somebody you're easily going to be able to contact. And so that's why we really need to have specialized people. Even internally, our channels just don't reach those people.
Super. Kevin, there's so many more questions I wanted to ask you. I can't believe we're out of time already. I think with that, we're going to have to close out this interview session. And I just want to thank you so much for being here today. It's a absolute pleasure working with you. And thanks for being here today. And I think we've addressed most of the questions that came in today. So with that, I think I'm going to move to our jump right beyond that. And just let you know, I did want to offer for everybody on the line today that if you'd like, that we're going to send out the recording to the webinar. In that, I'm going to include a link to complete the survey that went into today's session. And if you'd like to receive back the little self-assessment maturity report that we provided to other people that participate in the survey, we're happy to do that for you. So if you fill in the survey, it just takes a few minutes. We'll send back out to you then a report indicating your organization's maturity level and a few of the recommendations that are in there to help you move and support moving to the next level. So if you'd like that, feel free. We're happy to do that. And I want to thank you all very much for being here today, for participating, for staying on the line. And especially thanks to Kevin for being here and to all of you for participating. Happy Friday. Enjoy the rest of the day or your evening, depending on where you are. Thank you very much.